we'll get right to it. Allison, why don't you introduce Roger and whoever else is with him tonight. Roger, thank you for being with us.
Sure. Roger Phillips is our township engineer working for Gannett Fleming. He has been pursuing the issue of the sewer EDU since he started, which is definitely a very sensitive topic when you're doing economic development in the township. So since I don't have a lot of insight at this point, I am going to turn it over to Roger to share the EDU story for the township.
Thanks, Allison. Hopefully I can answer some of your questions tonight. Allison told me that you wanted to know the ins and outs of the process and where we are with everything. As we all know, the township has been under a connection management plan for some time due to capacity issues in some of the trunk lines. Under that, they were put under a connection management plan and a corrective action plan with the PADEP. And what that does is that lays out a plan of upgrading the system to where you alleviate some of the capacity issues, and it limits the number of connections you can make to that system until such time as those improvements are made. And along the way, since I've been involved a little over, I guess, a year and a half now, we've gone to the PADEP along with Aqua, and as you know, the system was sold and officially transmitted to Aqua, I guess approximately a year and a half ago. And on the call tonight is Fred Gerloff, who's a senior engineer in the wastewater department with Aqua, and he can talk about some more of the details of the corrective action plan. But since this is, we still, as the township, are still responsible for what's considered what's called Act 537 planning, which is just that. It's an act that requires municipalities to do sewage facilities planning for the entire municipality. Whether or not you own your system or not, you're still responsible under Act 537 to do the planning for that in conjunction with Aqua as a team member. So let's give an example. So if a dress shop wants to become a shoe store in an existing strip mall or an existing storefront, there's a process we have to go through under this connection management plan to file a mailer with the PADEP, and they will issue either a waiver of planning where you do nothing and you just convert the store over, or they require planning, which then involves a study of water usage and potential discharge from the new facility. And if it's as simple as a dress shop to a shoe store, there's usually nothing to be done. When you go from a shoe store to a takeout restaurant or a 60-seat restaurant or something like that, it's substantially more work because of the additional EDUs required to open that new facility. And if those EDUs are not available on a connection management plan, DEP won't permit that to move forward. Recently, we just were allotted some additional EDUs from the PADEP upon ours and Aqua's request for that, because there were some improvements done to the system recently, and that's resulted in 134 EDUs for specific projects that were already in the land development process, and then an additional 25 EDUs that are considered to be unallocated. That's kind of to be used for these the scenarios that I gave when a business wants to come into the township and convert an existing storefront or some something similar to that. So those EDUs, it's not what we all want, but it's a slow process. It's been a very slow process to get here. The capacity issues have existed from what I understand, the better part of 20 years or so. And it's slowly working its way back out. Fred, if you want to unmute and add anything to that and go over some of the improvements that have been made recently.
Yeah, I mean, I think Roger gave a great overview of the actual Act 537 planning process. What I think I would like to add to that is just that the sewage facilities planning process for Cheltenham Township is no different than what it is in Abington Township or East Joe Bip Township in Western Pennsylvania. It's always the same procedures, and everyone plays by the same rules. So, whether, again, Cheltenham owned the system or Aqua, the process remains the same. What of course has changed is the ownership of the system, the responsibility and the permitting and the day-to-day operations is fully in the hands of Aqua Pennsylvania. So, yeah, I mean, we purchased the system, as everyone knows, in December of 2019. So, since that time, we've undertaken a lot of different projects in order to try to do condition assessment of the existing pipes that are there, and try to start repairing some of the stuff that is either broken or beyond its useful life expectancy, or leaking, or pretty much all of the above. So as Roger kind of stated, we've ever since we bought the system, and even before, I sat in meetings before with the prior township managers and prior township engineers throughout the sale process, and now to present day. So I've been here since the start of it. And we've been talking with DEP and communicating with them about, the current plans and future plans. So, again, a lot of, as Roger indicated, a lot of things take time. The system is in hydraulic overload. So, we don't have necessarily the luxury to ask DEP for, 500 EDUs for projects that we necessarily, would like to see. We're trying to limit the requests based on the work that we've completed, extraneous flows that we've removed through some of our pipe replacement and other types of rehab, and tried to fit those into projects that are on the high priority list with the township. So, I've been doing a lot of communication with Roger and Henry at the township in order to identify what those projects are, what the needs are. So a lot of this first request, I'd like to say, in the 2.5 years that we've owned the system, we kind of had to narrow it down a little bit and say, okay, let's take a realistic look here at what we can kind of stomach in the short term, based off the work we completed and some of the really dying needs of the community. So it's not to say we don't want to request more and can't request more in the future. The current request was just more or less based off work completed and kind of some of the needs. So since that time, in addition to a lot of the project hard construction work we've done, we've been also doing a lot of modeling. We've developed a whole model of the interceptor lines in the collection system, and have captured a lot of flow data starting from 2019, and have gone back to prior consultants and other folks to obtain historical flow information. So we were able to use that in our models to really try to decipher what's happening in the system and why it's happening, and where things are overloaded, where the pinch points are. So we've learned a lot about the system in the last 2 years or so, and are working now on a larger project. More or less, the township might know of it as the third phase of the Interceptor A project, where we really need to take a tough look at the pipes and what flows are coming in from other folks, namely Abington, Jenkintown, and PWD. So along with those modeling and a lot of engineering evaluations, we've been in contact with PWD and have had continuous meetings with them in order to basically communicate with them, show them some of the facts that we have and some of the sharing flow data and information, and really to try to solve the hydraulic problem that Cheltenham is having right now. So those are just kind of some of the things, and we're, again, we're still, I have another meeting scheduled with PWD very soon here, and another one then with DEP to try to, evaluate these long-term solutions, that would, basically help out the hydraulic situation in a big way. But until that's implemented, we're doing smaller scale projects, again, try to get additional capacity released for near term projects. So hopefully I didn't babble on too long, but it's there's a lot of different things at play, short term and long term, and we're working on everything at the same time so that we can again try to satisfy the short and long term needs of the community.
And if I could add just one quick thing to what Fred just mentioned, he used the term hydraulic overload. Layperson's terms, that's when there's too much water in the pipe, right? And it comes out of the pipe and floods somewhere. As the owner of the system, Aqua is responsible to DEP that overloads do not exist and do not take place, which they become responsible, and what comes along with that is additional fines if they continue, just like the township was susceptible to fines years ago when the pipes would overload and flow and dump wastewater into the creek. So there's still, as Fred mentioned, with all the hydraulic modeling they're doing, there's still conditions in certain portions of the pipe where the hydraulic overloads potentially exist, and that's what DEP is requiring to be alleviated before they just turn everybody loose and say, okay, connect whatever you want now. They have to be completely on board that they agree that those overloads will be alleviated before they just turn things loose and let connections happen.
Can we ask questions?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. I have two related questions. So what you said there are some new EDUs that are going to be released or are released. I want to know if they will benefit the store owner who's trying to open in Elkins Park, the smoothie bar, and also the new restaurant that was a restaurant before and is trying to reopen. And also related to that, what can the township do to be proactive so that when new business owners try to open, they don't come up against this brick wall and are so shocked to find out that they've undertaken all these expenses and legal responsibilities to open a business that they can't open?
Sure. I'll try to address your second question first. That I think anyone that tries to open a business in town should certainly, their first stop should be to the township building and the codes office before they entertain signing any leases or anything, to make sure that they fully understand the process of going through that, so that they don't get themselves in a position where they've committed to a long-term lease and can't open the doors. I mean, that's certainly unfortunate, and we wouldn't want to see anyone have to go through that at any situation. So I think for the public, that's your first stop if you're thinking of opening a business. Your first question, there are 25 EDUs that are unallocated, and I just had two requests come across my desk in the last week. I believe one was the smoothie bar, and I think I just got some information about a potential restaurant opening. And to answer that question, yes, they would benefit from these 25 unallocated EDUs or any waiver of planning that DEP would grant, that where they wouldn't need an additional EDU. They would benefit from that. And those two specifically, I believe, are in the process.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So Roger, okay. Just to clarify, Roger, if a building has, say, 2 EDUs associated with it and a new business comes in, do those EDUs go with the building or do they disappear and then they have to get new ones?
They typically go with the building. One thing DEP has started doing recently, and Fred and I have had a number of conversations with DEP about this, that if you don't have proof of those EDUs, where somewhere in your records you have proof that there were 2 EDUs that were purchased for that use, or if you don't have water usage that backs up what that use was, DEP is looking at that like that they kind of go away. I disagree somewhat with that philosophy. I believe Fred does also. I don't want to speak for him, but we've had a number of discussions with the DEP about that, and that's a new kind of a new policy that they've been implementing. I don't even know if it's as hard as a policy, but that's something that they've been doing lately. But if you have water usage records, and unfortunately, some of these individual units, if you're in a building with 5 separate commercial businesses, water may be part of your rent, so you're not paying an individual water bill. So sometimes it's hard to get that information. DEP does accept water usage from similar facilities. So if you happen to own a restaurant somewhere else and you have a very similar restaurant that you're opening here, they'll take that information too.
Okay, so then if you say have a restaurant and go to a stationary store, so you would need less EDUs. Do those come back to the township to put into a bank?
They haven't, and that's something that I've also discussed with the DEP. I think DEP takes again, I don't want to speak for them either, but I think because of the hydraulic overloaded condition that's been going on for so long, I think they're taking a little bit of a harder line on this than they typically would.
Okay, I do want to get Fred before he goes, but Rhonda, I'm going to yield to you. And would you introduce yourself? And I apologize, but
No, that's fine. I'm Rhonda Iser. A lot of you know that I started the Cheltenham Infrastructure Solutions page when the sewer issue started. And I've continued it like forever. In fact, I think I was called the sewer queen by many citizens. So my question for Fred is, not Fred, for Roger, I apologize. Can you maybe address the issue with the pandemic and the DEP not holding to the EDUs of a property? Am I wrong on that? And that they want businesses to go back and readdress them?
You mean if a property was vacant during the pandemic, if that's what you're saying?
Yes.
They have in instances that they have accepted water usage from before the pandemic. They understand that the whole face of business has changed during that time. So
okay.
that they have, say it's a sandwich shop that closed up during the pandemic or something. They've accepted data from before the pandemic started.
And forgive me if I interrupted you, but because I think early on, prior to your time with the township, that was an issue that we were facing, correct? Particularly in the Elkins Park and Creekside area of the township?
If it was before me, I can't address it. I don't know. I apologize.
No, thank you for that responding. I appreciate that.
thanks.
Dwight, may I?
Go ahead, Mitch.
Thank you. Fred, first of all, thank you for being here. I'm not going to do what Dwight accuses me of frequently of conducting a trial with people. I'm just going to ask you some questions of factual nature.
All right, Matt raised his hand though.
I have been involved with this for almost 15 years. So I'm and 40 years in the township. So Fred, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
You know that we spent $11.5 million on the Interceptor project from our end. I'm wondering, since that time, since you acquired our system, how much money has Aqua invested in the infrastructure part of the sewer system for the Cheltenham component?
Yeah, as much as I manage some of the capital projects, I don't have the sum total in the last, since December handy. So I don't want to give you a bad fact. I can get back to you on that later if you would like me to. I don't have that on.
All right, I'll continue without being accusatory. In the condition of the sanitary sewer system compared to where we were when we did the investment for Interceptor, what would you say is the state of improvement overall of the system? If you bought the system and it was at just for the sake of argument, it was at a 50% acceptable level, where are we at now, or were we much worse? And so we're still basically, forgive the pun, swimming upstream.
Well, in terms of the infrastructure, it's always a little hard to quantify, I&I removal. When I say I&I, inflow and infiltration, and the effectiveness of your work. I mean, we've spent good money on a lot of different pipe rehab projects so far, but we've also done a lot of flow metering work. But that's the basis for a lot of the modeling and the long-term solutions that we've done. So it's hard to put kind of a percentage. I would agree that we're better off than we were 2.5 years ago. And that's just based on the work that we've done and and not only that, and I know it's, people want to see real results, but just the information we've gathered and the information that we've shared with the Department of Environmental Protection, I think they have a new perspective on the hydraulic situation in Cheltenham because of the information and the way that we've shared and shown it to them. So that's a big plus. And I think that speaks to the fact that they were so quick to, respond positively to the request, because throughout the way, we report to them 2 times a year on the work that we've done. So they know what we're doing. We stay in touch with them frequently. We've given different presentations on some of the hydraulics from myself and some of the other experts we have working on this. So in that perspective, they see, the benefits of the work that we've done during that time. I can't necessarily quantify, hey, we went from 50% good to 52% good. It's pretty hard. But what I will kind of say to you guys is what we did learn is that while we know there are some I&I issues in the town, we don't necessarily think that there's a ridiculous, let's say, or an unusually bad I&I situation. A lot of this, we have some areas where we know it is bad. We have some undersized pipes in some areas, but we also have some issues with some of the flow that we are receiving from PWD in certain storm events. So, on a dry weather day in the town, things look pretty good. But when we start getting some of these storms, we start getting a lot of flow from PWD, and that kind of creates a bottleneck and a hydraulic constriction in some of the interceptor lines. So that's kind of part of the reason why we're bringing them into the fold and trying to work and communicate with them and their engineering team so that we can kind of understand the solution, or understand the problems and look towards some solutions, possibly jointly. And I say that possibly because, everybody's kind of got to get there and we have to work together. The 2 systems, as you know, are tied to the hip. We've got flow from their system coming into our system, into our center interceptor line briefly, and then going back into their system. So it's a little bit unusual in that stance. So when everybody's having some issues with flows during wet weather events, it affects everybody. So it's not just a Cheltenham problem. It's a Abington, Jenkintown, PWD problem. Everybody's kind of connected. So we're trying to cater our solutions towards, I'm not going to say we can't execute a solution that fixes it for ourselves, but it's going to be a lot easier if these other entities understand the problems and we can maybe work towards some joint solutions. So
Fred, I appreciate that. Let me get a couple more questions as I know you're on a timeline.
Sure.
Why don't we go with Deb, Matt, and then Rhonda, is your hand still up or did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. I had one more question that I think Fred can address before he needs to leave us.
All right, if you don't mind, if you would just hold, let's get
Of
Deb
course.
and Matt in since they didn't have a question yet.
Of
Deb,
course.
go ahead.
Well, I want to thank you guys both for coming. 2 questions. One, I think goes more to Roger, is just in Glenside. I'm just curious if we've got 2 businesses over there that are waiting on EDUs, or that are in the process of prepping to get open. One is El Limon, a restaurant, and the other is Elandra. It's a skincare on Easton Road. And that's my first question. My second question is, since we filter businesses and we calculate the flow out of a business, are you guys involved at all when there's new development for residential? because obviously homes aren't getting regulated and monitored in the same capacity that a business is.
It's the same process when you're doing a new residential development as it is doing the Act 537 stuff for businesses. It's the same process. That what a EDU is an equivalent dwelling unit, and it's set up so that you're not measuring the flow out of everyone's house. So it's one EDU is an equivalent number that kind of equalizes itself over an entire system. So you may discharge less water than your neighbor, but an EDU is an EDU, and that's why they do it, for simplicity, because if you didn't do that, you wouldn't be able to track all of that. It'd be a data nightmare.
Oh, I'm sure it's a data nightmare. I mean, I'm just thinking, you could have a house with 6 girls in it that shower and wash their hair every day. And then you've got a single solopreneur that's trying to open a business, and you're calculating this as apples to apples, which to me, it's like an apple to a watermelon.
It's not necessarily apples to apples, but a house is a house. One EDU is a house. 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, it's a house. When it comes to the commercial facilities, we look at it as actual discharge and then back into that EDU number. So there's a whole, the DEP and most wastewater textbooks have flow figures, or we use actual water data if we can get it from another facility that'll say, see if you have a beauty salon, say it could be, and I don't know if this is the exact number because I don't have my book open, but it's like $100 a chair, or 100 gallons a chair, or something like that. There's different standards of that. When you do a restaurant, it's typically 10 gallons per seat in the restaurant. So if you have a 60-seat restaurant, that would be 600 gallons, plus there's other factors that you add on based on the number of employees and the number of, if you don't serve lunch, there's a different factor than if you do serve lunch. You add that all up and you divide it by, in Cheltenham, the number is 262, which then puts it into the EDU numbers. So that's how that's equalized.
Okay, Deb, are your questions answered?
No, are the 2 businesses that I mentioned, have you seen those cross your desk?
I can't say 100% the skincare one, that doesn't sound familiar to me, but I have other people that take care of this for me. But Il Limon, one of the people that work for me spoke with Henry this afternoon about that, and that's in the process. Henry's actually acquiring some additional water usage information from that facility.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, Matt, thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. Thank you, Roger and Fred. I sort of have 2 questions, but I'll put them together and you can answer them as you see fit. Roger, you talked, this is the Economic Development Task Force. The folks on this call are going into probably established places where people have already signed the lease, right? And then get the shock of, oh, I gotta do this planning module. So could you speak to if someone is going into a business that's starting up, they're doing the construction in the location, they've already signed a lease, what are the steps in addition to going to the township that they should do and are going to have to do in order to have a successful and expeditious process? Because I think that's going to be the scenario that Deb and Rita and everybody's going to be dealing with.
Yeah, I think they should also hire a consulting engineer if it's going to be a large enough facility, and not try to do it themselves, because it is a requirement of the business owner to process these planning modules. And this is not something specific to Cheltenham. Like Fred mentioned earlier, this is the way it is all over the state. If you're anywhere in the state and you're changing a dress shop to a hoagie shop, you're filling out the same papers there that you are in Cheltenham. And not everybody is under a connection management plan, so that the process may be smoother in other areas, but it's the same process.
So the process is that you reach out to the township. Maybe you have a consultant. If you're too small, maybe you can't afford it. And then what happens? What do you have to do?
They fill out what's called a sewage facilities planning module mailer, which gets submitted to the DEP. And I can tell you one thing that's different, Matt, in Cheltenham than anywhere else that I work all across the state is we do
That's
that.
help.
We do that for the applicant, where
Yeah.
nowhere else where I work, we have them do that. We review that before it goes to make sure it meets the township codes and ordinances and is in conformance with whatever 537 plan is in place for that. But we don't physically do that for them. In Cheltenham, we physically fill out the forms and submit them to DEP on behalf of the applicant.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a function of the fact that you and Henry and crew hear from the commissioners and business owners and stuff like that, and we need business
Right.
in this township, so there's an incentive there.
My attorneys will tell you that could be a liability issue too.
Well, okay, fair enough. Who listens to attorneys anyway? So after you fill that out, then it goes to DEP, and then what happens? You sort of wait, or
the DEP will review it,
Okay.
and they'll come back with questions, comments, or an approval or a rejection, or what's called a waiver of planning, where you can connect without necessarily, having the EDUs, because they're waiving it, saying that they're equal. What's replacing it is similar.
Okay.
Fred, you want to add anything to that process? Aqua has to sign off on that capacity in this too, as the owner of the system. That's one of the steps.
Yeah, nothing to add to that, but I would say, yeah, I mean, you guys are unique. I mean, when I was working with the township, when we started to buy it, they were like, well, what's going to happen to the mom and pop shop that wants to come in, and get their EDU? It's like, well, they would go through the sewage facilities planning process. And like Roger said, Cheltenham isn't the only place we serve. I mean, you guys go above and beyond when it comes to filling out these modules for folks. I mean, there's not many other places, and not that we're not going to help folks get through the process. We want the customers, you guys want the growth, but you guys are doing a lot of hand holding over there that we don't typically see in other towns.
And then my last question, this could be quick, and maybe this is for Fred as much as Roger. What's the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Give us something to look forward to here, that, and obviously I'm not asking you to say, oh, in 18 months, this will all be gone, but what are we doing? How are we going to be successful over the course of the next year, 2 years, 10 years, whatever it is?
So the ultimate light at the end of the tunnel is you get out from under a connection management plan, right? And the system is no longer in hydraulic overload. And that then takes a lot of the planning module review from the DEP level down to the township level, where the township can review them on behalf of the DEP, which cuts the timeline substantially. And again, working alongside Aqua, because they're the ones that they're the gatekeeper of the EDUs eventually, because it's their pipe and they're responsible for what goes in it. So once we get out from under this connection management plan, we're kind of policing ourselves now along with Aqua, and we don't have the EDU roadblock that currently exists with DEP, where they say you're not permitted to connect because you have an hydraulic overload.
So Fred, what's the horizon? What's the goal for getting to that point?
Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. It's not going to happen overnight. We've got a couple of, based on, again, the hydraulic modeling and the flow data that we've collected over a couple of years. We have some options for some solutions. And again, that's kind of why we're talking with PWD right now. We haven't necessarily gone, and we're not to the point where we're ready to present anything formally to the township at this point. But we've got some things that we need to get through with respect to, these different scenarios and who might be on board and who's not on board with certain solutions. But it comes down to the capacity. We don't really have the luxury of controlling our own destiny. If we could just say, well, it's as simple as, upgrading a wastewater treatment plant to give you guys, ample more capacity. The kind of the flow that we're sending to PWD is fixed in a sense that if we want to say, well, we'll buy more capacity from PWD, well, then they're going to say, well, you're going to have to pony up and pay us millions of dollars to upgrade the pipes coming from your system to our treatment plant. And that's not feasible. So, it's not just as simple as buying more capacity. The solution is going to have to be multi-pronged in the sense of reducing, I&I infiltration, but then also getting some others to come on board with some of those reductions. And I'll just kind of keep it as simple as that for now. But like Roger says, the light at the end of the tunnel here is getting out from underneath the connections management plan, which is our priority, number one. So we like Roger said, we can kind of loosen up on and have these EDUs to give to these new restaurants or developments. Let's face it, I mean, in as much as there's some redevelopment going on in the town, it's a largely developed town. We do have some larger tracts, but that's the nice thing. It's not like we're sitting here and we're saying, well, we need, double the amount of capacity because half the township's undeveloped. So it's definitely it's a doable task. But we've got, again, I like to say we're attached to the hip to some other folks here that we need to kind of consider in the process. And that's what we're trying to do. But getting out from underneath that corrective action and management plans is priority number one. And we're going to do that through infrastructure projects.
So I want to follow up on that, if I may. Rhonda, let me ask you this. Is your question for Roger or Fred?
It was a little bit of both.
Okay, go ahead, and then I'm going after you.
Okay, good. The quick question that came up earlier that I raised my hand for was about what Aqua was doing for us. And I was going to ask Fred to briefly talk about the find and fix on the sewer mains that might assist in some of the process. And then after Roger talked, my second question is, since we have like a pool that we have to pull from that DEP allotted us, is that going to help speed the process along? And can you explain yes or no how on that question?
I'll try to answer that both real quick. Your last question first. Yeah, when we have the pool, it makes it a lot easier because we don't have to go back to ask DEP to grant us these extra EDUs. I'm going to say, hey, listen, we've got these 2 EDUs in our back pocket. We're going to allocate them to, Joe's Smoothie Shop, on wherever on Main Street. And so that's going to make the process, the facilities, you still have to go through the paperwork and the steps, but that's going to make it a lot quicker when we have the EDUs sitting in wait. And then your other question was, what was that one, Rhonda? The one about?
The one where you always talk about, Fred, the find and fix.
Oh, yeah. So the find and fix is just one of the many.
You don't have to do a long dissertation on it, but I think people don't understand what Aqua's trying to do to fix the system. And I think that's an important factor in the hydraulics and the INIs, et cetera. So.
Yeah, so the find and fix is more something we focus for more of the near-term demands of the system. So it's basically infrastructure assessment. And so basically we're looking at a lot of the pipes through CCTV inspection and creating a database of the conditions assessments of the pipes, which ones are good, which ones are bad, which ones need to be looked at in a couple more years, and we're ranking and prioritizing them to ensure that our money that we're spending is prudent and in the right place. We don't want to be fixing, a pipe that's okay with and maybe possibly missing something that's in dire need of replacement. So it's prioritizing where we're spending our time and efforts and resources.
Okay, Fred, thank you so much. Question.
Mm-hmm.
Is it safe to say that the hydraulic overflow is the panacea to everything we've been talking about and dealing with in terms of the rationalization of these EDUs?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole, that's
All
the whole thing. That's.
So,
Okay.
so again, I mentioned, I believe I mentioned earlier, but it's the owner of the pipe's responsibility to keep the water in the pipe. I'm oversimplifying here. When the
Okay.
water comes out of the pipe, when it's not supposed to, DEP jumps on you. And
All right.
that's where these things come. So,
Okay.
and some of the discussion about fixing I&I is a weird thing, right? If you reduce your dry weather flows, that's very good, but you can still get a rain event, which is going to flood your system, right? So you got to find the bad parts of your system that may not be leaking 6 days a week. And then when the creek comes up or when you get a large flooding event, will create that overflow. And when there's an overflow, Aqua is required by law to notify DEP, and DEP keeps the little book. And when they have overflows, they don't turn around and say, oh, go ahead and connect 100 new houses. I mean, they just.
All right, let me finish. That was a leading question. Thanks, Roger. That was a leading question. The next question, Fred, is if the hydraulic overflow is the panacea, and this is kind of a follow-up to where I think Matt was going, and that is the light at the end of the tunnel, the resolution to the hydraulic overflow, is that 6 hours away, 6 days a week, 6 days away, 6 years away? Any idea?
Well, yeah, like I said, it's not, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's probably
I don't
several
want you
years away.
to.
It's several years away because, like you guys conducted the one phase of the interceptor project, if we were just going to, which, we're looking at replacing and upgrading portions of the last remaining portions of the interceptor, it's all along Tookenny Creek. There's an extensive amount of environmental regulations and permitting and design and stuff that we need to jump through in the midst of everything else in order to execute a project. So we've got to come up with the right solution. I mean, we're a measure twice, cut once, or measure twice, cut once kind of organization where we want to know we have the right solution. Make sure it's the right thing, get all of our necessary regulations and permits, and then execute it. So it's several years.
Okay.
But again, in the meantime, what Aqua is trying to do, we're very much understanding of the needs of the community. We're trying to do small scale stuff to free up some of these dire need projects. So we're kind of playing to
Yeah, during
well-
that process over the next several years, we will be able to go back to DEP occasionally with another request, showing them that some improvement has been made, and just like they did this time, they could release a little bit more. They've told us not to come back once a month, right? So they've already told us that, but we will come back incrementally as their improvements are taking place and try to free up more and more, as long as we again stay out of the hydraulic overloads.
Okay, Allison and then Mitch.
Okay, this is just to follow up on the line of questioning from Matt. So as a small business owner, if you want to open a business, how much time should you allot to go through this process? I mean, is it a month, 60 days, 6 months?
Some of the smaller ones, we've been able to get responses from DEP, I would say inside of 60 days. Some take longer. I can't speak for DEP. If there are no EDUs available, obviously it would take longer, unless it, again, depending on what type of business it is. If it's a similar business replacing a business in that location, or if it's a lower flow generator, they may waive planning. So the DEP has worked with us so far over the last year or so in allowing what I thought was more than they would on some of the waivers of planning.
So this would be something you'd be able to give an applicant kind of an idea of how long it might take when you meet with them before they sign a lease?
Sure, if that's the process that the township wants to undertake, absolutely. I believe Henry does that already to a certain extent.
Mitch?
Can I just go with one more question?
Yes, please.
So Fred, I do have a question, because we've had tremendous amount of difficulty with the DEP regulator particularly Stephanie Rittenhouse, who's basically put incredible obstacles in front of us, even in the most routine inquiries. And I know we've had quote unquote some release, and just so people here know, 79 of those EDUs are for the senior housing that's going to be on Ashburn Road, right across from the, right next to the Cheltenham Elementary School. That's 3 stories, 79 units, and 47 of those are going to be for the Yeshiva Gedolah, which took the building over at Kolami. So what you see is the 159 EDUs that have been allocated there are already so few left. And we know there are probably the need for about 300 to 400 EDUs just based on things that have been brought to our attention and development plans that, even though they haven't been approved, they've been flowing, quote unquote, through our system. So I guess my question to you is, what can we do as both a municipality, and you have on the chief of staff of a very effective state senator, that might help us get a little bit more cooperation and some more leverage, so that we're not just on the outside looking in. This is our township. We need those EDUs. You have the controls of the system, but we have the need for commerce, especially with the Economic Development Task Force and their concerns. So help reassure us, Fred, that there's some things that we can do rather than just sitting and waiting for those fixes to take place. We really can't afford to be in that position, and we've invested enough money that we shouldn't be in that. By the way, I'll just finish with including a 54% increase in sewer rates for every residential property in the township.
Right. Well, and I understand your perspective there. And it is a daunting task, and one that we're fully up on. And so when we bought the town's sewer system, we knew these things, right? We understood the circumstances, and that's why we laid forth, the capital plan that we kind of outlined to the town during the acquisition phase. And so we're stuck to that, and that's what we're working on executing. So again, rest assured, the capital that we are investing and going to be investing in the future is directly related to solving the problem. So that is, the reason why we're here, and what we're aimed and focused at doing. I mean, as far as what you can do, sitting on your hands, I mean, that's part of the reason you sold the system. I'm just going to be blunt, is because we're here to help solve the problem. I know you guys are still involved from the economic planning and the Act 537 planning process. So that means that we're working with you guys to identify what those needs are and what needs to come first. We're not here to try to tell you guys where to use the EDUs. I've been talking with Henry and Roger specifically about, what are the needs and where are they? What DEP didn't want to see is us list, 500, ask for 500 EDUs for projects that aren't necessarily shovel ready right off the bat. So, what I would say is let us do our thing with respect to capital planning and implementation of the infrastructure. We'll continue to work with you guys on the planning side. We'll execute the projects and make sure that we can bring the system into compliance. So that's kind of my perspective on that.
And
Hopefully
if I can add briefly to that, Mitch, I don't believe that anyone at DEP is intentionally being a roadblock to this. I believe they are following the regulations, and that's part of the process. And there was a lot of steps that could have been taken along the way many years ago, but we're here where we are today, and they're following their process. We're conforming to that process and doing it as expeditiously as we can.
I would say, as much as I know there's just some, you had mentioned some frustrations with some of the folks at DEP regarding their applications or how they've done things. I can honestly say I've seen a much more cooperative DEP department since we took ownership. And a lot of that has to do with the communication that Roger has done, myself, and other folks here at Aqua to kind of shed light on the hydraulic overload and what we've been doing. And rather than, I was in meetings, and I'm a pretty straightforward guy. I was in some of the meetings before we took the system over, and it was very contentious. I've never been in a meeting with a regulator that was so contentious. And since that time, I've never felt that feeling, since that time. Things have been going very smoothly. We're trying to, and I think that we're making progress on that front, where, like Roger says, it's been decades of some real angst and different things. So I can say in these 2.5 years, it's been going really well. And I'm not trying to sugarcoat that. I think we're on the right path here. So.
And just so people know, Roger Phillips has been an incredible and exceptional addition to our municipality. So there's nothing in
Sounds like it.
anything that I question that doesn't reflect very favorably on the improvements that we've experienced. So Roger, kudos to all you've done. So as you know, I'm a tough guy, but I also know and appreciate how much you've accomplished in the time you've been here.
Oh, thank you, Mitch.
Deb? You're muted. You're muted.
Yep, sorry.
Go ahead.
Mitch brought up one thing, which was the water bills in the increase in how hefty they keep rising. And I'm just curious if that's something that we're going to see a continuation as you keep replacing pipes. As we've had a 54% increase in our water bills already, is it going to exponentially go up again?
Well, I mean, our rates are set by the PUC. And so every time we go in and talk to the PUC about rates, you guys will get notice of it. And there's, public review and comment about those. We had a recent, filing. So all of that is public information. To put it lightly, I'm in the engineering department. I focus on execution of these capital projects to make sure this stuff like this gets straightened out and working with our construction. I don't really do a whole lot with the rates, but what I do know is it's a very public process through the PUC. And we have not strayed from the capital plan that we laid forth when we purchased the system. Everything is still as advertised, I would say.
Thank you.
My apologies. Okay. Any other questions for Roger and Fred? Well, let me say this, Roger and Fred, our team has been asking every meeting and in between every meeting, questions about EDUs, and I think you answered them all tonight. We can't thank you enough for sharing your time and certainly all the information that you shared with us.
Okay.
You were going to say something, Roger?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it. And feel free to have Allison contact me at any time if you have specific questions about a specific business that is coming in, wants to come in, they're trying to get in and they're stuck in this, in this whirlpool. Feel free to work through Allison and I can give you updates of where everything is.
I think one of the things we have to do, and I don't know what the answer is right now, but we got to stop folks from ending up in a position where they have leased a property and then can't open because they don't have the EDUs. So I don't know what the answer is, but that's where
About
we gotta
making
be.
landlords more aware. The property owners should be aware that anybody that they want to lease to needs to go to zoning first before they sign.
It's not in their interest.
It's not. They want to get the lease money as soon as possible.
I
But
get that.
Yeah, but if I could add to that, I'll put my township engineer hat on now. From a zoning position, it would be not a very good idea to make sure that your change of use can actually go there before you sign your lease. I mean, because zoning codes are quirky. We all know that. And again, changing a use in a storefront, sometimes the zoning doesn't permit it.
Mhm.
and you could really get stuck in a bad position with a. And I agree, it should be a landlord disclosure, but doesn't always work that way.
Yeah. Rita, last question.
Well, it's actually a related question, and it's more for Mitch and Matt. So maybe you want to wait till after
Okay.
if Roger and Fred are going to leave us.
Yeah, I'm sure they can't wait to get off this call.
I'm just glad I haven't had my kids yelling in the background. Like my wife has done a good job keeping it at bay. So I was
Yeah.
waiting for
We
a
appreciate it.
moment where they like run over to me while I'm talking. So
Right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
Thanks.